The look on Karen's face when I told her she was trespassing on my private lake was worth every penny of the legal fees that followed. Picture this. I'm standing on my dock pointing at fresh, no trespassing signs, while HOA President Brenda Hutchinson turns ghost white, her pontoon boat's motor sputtering into silence. 20 neighbors watch from the shore as Brenda realizes she's been harassing the actual landowner for months. But here's the kicker. This wasn't just about lake access. Brenda had been planning to hit our community with $2.3 million in assessments, using fake shared waterfront rights as her justification. She thought she'd found the perfect mark when I inherited this property. Boy, was she wrong. My name is Marcus Thornfield. 6 months ago, I was recently divorced, burned out from my civil engineering job and questioning every life choice I'd ever made. Then, I got the call that changed everything. My grandfather, Ezra, had passed away, leaving me his entire Lakefront estate in Millbrook, Wisconsin. Grandpa Ezra wasn't just a property owner, he was the beloved guardian of Crystal Lake. He owned 847 acres, including over 2 miles of pristine shoreline, and for 60 years, he had treated that lake like a big community resource. I spent every childhood summer here, learning about water rights while the dock planks creaked under my feet. That's when I met Brenda Hutchinson. She had moved from the Minneapolis suburbs 3 years earlier on a mission to elevate community standards, which apparently meant micromanaging everyone's mailbox height. She showed up a week after I arrived, clipboard in hand, and a shark smile. "We need to discuss your grandfather's informal arrangements with the community," she announced. She whipped out a 47-page community lake usage agreement, demanding a $12,000 annual maintenance fee. She claimed lake access was an implied easement that now needed proper documentation. I politely declined, mentioning I was still reviewing Grandpa's documents. Her smile could have frozen the lake in July. The following weekend, I hosted a barbecue for some old college friends. At 2 p.m., Hurricane Brenda stormed onto my dock, waving laminated violation notices. "Sir, this community has standards," she declared, demanding a guest list like she was running Border Patrol. The party was over. That evening, feeling like I'd failed Grandpa's memory, I decided to explore his study. Behind a bookshelf, I found a hidden panel. Inside a cedar chest were the original land deeds and water rights documents, dating back to the 1920s. One document made me grin like an idiot. A 1923 Crystal Lake water rights grant, signed, notarized, and filed with the county, granting my family exclusive ownership of the entire lake. Brenda had been running a protection racket on property she didn't own, couldn't control, and had zero legal authority over. I wasn't dealing with an overzealous neighbor, I was dealing with a con artist. The next morning, a fake cease and desist letter from a non-existent law firm was shoved under my windshield wiper. Brenda's power play got me curious. I started doing some detective work. My neighbor Dorothy, who'd lived here since the Carter administration, told me, "Your grandpa never charged nobody nothing for 60 years. Then this woman appears, talking about proper management." Another neighbor, Jim, dropped the real bombshell. Brenda had been collecting $200 in monthly lake fees from 23 families for over 2 years. That's nearly $5,000 a month for doing absolutely nothing. I went to the county courthouse. The records confirmed it. No HOA had ever been legally filed for Millbrook Shores. Zero paperwork. Zero legal standing. Brenda's entire operation was a sham. The next day, a sheriff's deputy appeared at my door. Brenda had filed a false complaint, claiming I'd threatened residents. His eyebrows shot up as I spread the real property deeds across my kitchen table. "Well, I'll be damned," he muttered. "She never mentioned you actually owned the lake." He went over to her house, and I watched her confident smirk melt as he explained the basics of property law. But Brenda wasn't done. She held a community meeting, armed with a PowerPoint presentation, to warn residents about the liability issues of an unmanaged lake. I waited until she finished her fear-mongering before I stood up. "Mrs. Hutchinson," I asked, loud enough for everyone to hear, "could you explain which legal authority granted you lake management rights?" The room went silent. I then passed out copies of the 1923 Water Rights Grant. The murmurs built like distant thunder as people realized they'd been scammed. Brenda grabbed her laptop and fled, shouting something about her legal counsel. But her desperation had just begun. The next morning, I found surveyor stakes around my property, with ribbons indicating a pending development. A quick call to the county planning office revealed Brenda had filed an application to subdivide my lakefront for a community recreational facility, complete with a 40-car parking lot and rental cabins. She had used signatures she'd collected for a speedboat safety petition and submitted them as proof of community support for her development fantasy. That wasn't just a scam anymore, it was fraud. That's when I discovered Grandpa's final brilliant move. In a locked cedar chest, I found his correspondence with the Wisconsin Department of Natural Resources. Crystal Lake had been designated as a critical watershed protection zone in 1999, with my grandfather serving as its legal steward. The state had been paying him $47,000 annually for conservation management for 20 years. The funds were now in an environmental trust, with me as the automatic beneficiary. Any construction within 500 feet of the shoreline required a federal environmental impact study. Brenda's development plans would violate 3 separate federal environmental protection laws, with penalties of $50,000 per day. But the most beautiful irony was this. As the legal steward, I was actually required to maintain public access for educational and recreational use. All of Brenda's demands for community access were already legally mandated, but without any fees, management companies, or her fake HOA. The trap was set. The federal investigation was underway. I announced the first annual Crystal Lake Heritage Festival for the 4th of July weekend, completely free and funded by the Conservation Trust. Free boat rides, fishing lessons, a new wheelchair-accessible fishing pier, everything Brenda had promised, but legitimate and at no cost to the residents. On the day of the festival, as 200 community members enjoyed the celebration, Brenda marched onto the grounds, clipboard in hand, and tried to shut down the illegal gathering. I was ready. I handed her my permits and insurance documents. Then, in front of the news crews that had gathered, I took the microphone. I walked the entire community through the 1923 Water Rights Grant, the EPA designations, and the Conservation Trust documents. "Mrs. Hutchinson," I announced, "this is all private property, and you have been trespassing for months while collecting fees for services you had no authority to provide." That's when the sheriff's deputy stepped forward. "Ma'am, the FBI has a warrant for your arrest on federal fraud charges." The metallic click of handcuffs echoed across the suddenly silent festival grounds. She was charged with wire fraud, mail fraud, and forgery. She pleaded guilty to 3 felony charges, agreeing to pay $47,000 in restitution. Every defrauded family received a full refund. Brenda lost her house to pay the legal fees, and her reign of terror was finally over. The lake was free. The community was united, and my grandfather's legacy, I knew, was safe.